won't stand for it. And God is as every bit jealous of our love as our spouses are. There are several instances throughout the Bible when God tells his people to stop holding worship services. Because their lives, the rest of their lives, do not demonstrate a love for him. In Jeremiah, God says that if the Israelites, are intent on continuing to covet and hate, to lust and to lie, then they should just shut down their church. Because he doesn't want their worship anyway. And he rejects their offerings. The prophet Amos talks for God and tells Israel that he hates their singing, that he rejects their offerings and shuts his ears to them because they refuse to do justice for the poor and the marginalized. Can you imagine? Several times in the Bible, God reminds his people that obedience is better than worship. And I think if faced with a choice, God would rather have people skipping church to live a life that honors him, rather than to come to church on Sunday and ignore him from Monday to Saturday. The Bible's perspective, as expressed in Psalm 113, is this: from dawn until sunset, the name of the Lord deserves to be praised on Sunday only. No. The name of the Lord deserves to be praised, period. All the time. This is what God truly desires from our lives. This is what truly puts a smile on God's face, that our lives would be worship. Ongoing, continuous expressions of our love for him in everything that we do. Not simply going through the motions of getting caught up in debates about the proper forms of worship and whether or not we should have drums on the stage, or whether we should sing hymns or choruses, or whether we should use pop culture music in our services or not, or lights or not, or all of that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we pour every part of our lives out before God and offer them to him in worship, out of an all-consuming love for him. That's what will bring a smile to God's face. And that is what it means to worship. Every once in a while, there's a revolutionary idea that has the power to radically reshape the way we think about our world. 60 years ago, television taught us to think narratively in stories rather than linearly, changing the face of debate in our culture. 20 years ago, the internet appears, and it drastically shrinks our world into a global village, restructuring our experience of community. But before them all, 500 years ago, one man had a revolutionary idea that changed the way people thought about the universe. In 1543, in a society fundamentally convinced that the Earth was the center of the universe, a man named Nicholas Copernicus published a book entitled On the Revolutions of the Celestial Orbs, in which he proposed a mathematical model that displaced the Earth's centricity and firmly fixed the sun in the center of the solar system. The idea had been floating around for thousands of years. But for the first time in history, it had been given credence as a mathematical theory. Astronomers, theologians alike rejected it out of hand as absurd, impossible, until men like Galileo Galilei picked up the Copernican mantle and began to verify his mathematical proposals with scientific observations. In 1633, Galileo was convicted of civil disobedience, confined to house arrest, and forbidden to publish anything. And a decade later, Galileo was dead, and Isaac Newton was born. When the plague closed Cambridge University in 1664, where Newton was studying, Newton retreated into the country where he sat under an apple tree, famous story, and discovered the laws of gravity and motion. He invented calculus and mathematically proved the law that the orbits of the planets and how they revolved around the sun. Work that was to be published 20 years later in his now famous work, Principia Mathematica. What Copernicus had proposed as mathematical theory was now widely acknowledged as irrefutable scientific law. And humanity learned that it was not the center of everything. Through Copernicus's theory, and though it had been proven, has been proven a myriad of ways by scientific and mathematical communities, we still live in a culture that refuses to believe that humanity is not the center of everything. Wall Street, Madison Avenue, Hollywood, they all preach the same message out of their own texts, that we are fixed at the very center of our own universe. That there is nothing in the world more important than looking out for me, number one. That we deserve a break today. That I am. Our highest purpose is to eat, drink, and be merry. The banner slogan hangs above our heads, you only go around once. And there's nothing more important, nothing more significant in life than to pursue pleasure with gusto. Worship is the Copernican revolution of our spiritual lives. It rocks our world. It shakes us up. It confronts us as misguided and self-centered people. It removes us from our lofty position at the center of everything and places God firmly where He belongs. Worship reorients our vision, transforming our inward gaze to an upward gaze, and then to an outward gaze. Worship is the spontaneous, joyful, exciting, outward expression of an inward heart that has fallen desperately in love with God. It bubbles over from our hearts and our lives, and so we offer ourselves back to Him for His pleasure. See, worship, true worship, transforms us into people whose highest goal is to put a smile on God's face. That's what worship is all about.